Hello everyone, time for another wargaming update, and first thing to show you are the Assault Group figures, samurai with bows, 2 blister packs, 4 figures each, and also one of their character figures which they now sell separately. They used to give away, which is the guy there holding the severed head, waving it at the enemy. And these figures, you all know I've got a massive lead mountain, but something I've never confessed to in the past is I've also got this domain that I call lead limbo, and it's a very kind of guilty area where I get things out of my lead mountain, take them out of their packaging, start to paint them, maybe just prime them, and then I lose a little bit of mojo, put them to one side, and eventually something else comes along that takes my interest, and I never get around to completing them, and they end up in a whole load of box files, so that they're not making me feel too guilty about it, and I forget about them. But I thought it was high time, and these have been in my lead limbo, I would say 8 or 9 years, and it was time to kind of try and get around to painting them. And my interest in this period, they're not samurai from the sort of area of interest of most wargamers, which is the Sengoku Jidai period in the sort of 17th century, the period of it's called the Age of War, Japan in the Age of War, when some Western technology was beginning to enter the country. There were Jesuit missions and introduction of black powder weapons, early muskets and so on. And these actually date to the Genpei Wars, which was a conflict that took place at the end of the 12th century, so it's very much pre-black powder. My interest in the period was first sparked by a game you may have seen on one of my recent videos called Lords of the Rising Sun, which I used to play on the Amiga, and it was basically a war between 2 clans in the main, the Taira and the Minamoto, and the Minamoto were kind of you can kind of see their kind of parallel in the Marcher Barons of the of England. They were clans that were given military kind of control over areas to the north of the main island of Japan, Honshu, bordering the sort of Ainu folk, the sort of troublesome races to the north of Japan. So very, very similar to the marches along the edge of Wales, which were, given over to barons around the similar time, to sort of hold in and contain the Welsh, and there was sort of a perpetual state of war. So they became the most sort of military experienced lords in the country, and the same applies to the Minamoto. They were constantly honing their military skills, and a war broke out between the Minamoto and the Taira clan, and the Taira were the sort of established family who dominated the emperor's court, often married their daughters to the emperors, so that their female members of their family were often the wives or mothers of later emperors and so on. So they had a lot of influence that way, but they misappropriated their rule really, and became corrupt and tyrannical, and there were a few rebellions against them, especially from the warrior monks, who the Taira tried to suppress, and so the Minamoto and the monks waged a sort of civil war against the Taira. But anyway, that's enough of a history lesson. The colours and the uniforms were a lot more decorative than in the later period, and that's another one of the reasons why I like this period. They're quite difficult to paint, but far more interesting when they're completed. And these are all samurai with bows. Now that is another peculiarity of the period, that the bow was considered a kind of noble weapon, as it were. So the samurai kind of were as likely to use bows as they were to use their swords and other weapons. Another peculiarity being that they actually were accustomed to using bows on horseback as well, which is why the hold on the longbow is lower down. That's to allow for the fact that they could be on horseback, and you want less of the bow rubbing or hitting the flank of the horse. So the majority of the bow is above the height of the saddle, and that's why you get this sort of distinctive curve to the bow almost. But it does make it a little bit difficult in terms of wargaming with them. I probably have got enough figures in my collection now to play a small skirmish type game, something like on the scale of Lion Rampant, but you have to kind of adapt the rules, because this is really, as I say, they're the equivalent sort of period to the sort of medieval period, in the West. But in the West, in England, for instance, you had longbowmen, but they were a lower class than the knights. So these are really knights on horseback with longbows. So you've got to try and find a suitable adaptation to a set of rules of your choosing to incorporate all that into it. The only rules I know of that deal with this period are the skirmish, the Osprey skirmish rule set Ronin, which is a sort of samurai skirmish game, and it does have an adaptation at the back for the use of the figures in the Kamakura, what they call the Kamakura period. The Kamakura period began at the end of the Genpei Wars, when Yoritomo Minamoto established a shogunate, and his centre of power was Kamakura, and so the Kamakura period would do as a set of rules for the slightly earlier Genpei Wars. So the only trouble with that being that Ronin isn't really a very good set of rules for solo warplay. You have to sort of both players have to select chits that they play, so you have to the hand has to be concealed, as it were. So you'd have to introduce some kind of random selection of those chits in order to be able to play it solo. But anyway, enough of that. Let's on to something else that I've finished painting. Okay, now I haven't been doing much 3D printing of late, and that's not because of a lack of enthusiasm. It's because I'm building up this massive backlog of models that I need to paint. So I thought I ought to crack on with doing some of that. So I got a load of camels out, and these are the first three that I've completed painting. They're from a set of STL files called Empire of Scorching Sands, which is a sort of fantasy themed Arabian Nights type theme. But you may have seen some of those figures that I have already painted in my Saga Age of Magic challenge that I participated in. But the camels struck me could be used not only for fantasy but for any period that requires camels, because the majority of them are baggage camels and look, sort of fairly normal. There's nothing really fanciful or fantastic about them. So I thought I would paint them all up and use them in a whole variety of war games. These ones are the sort of I don't know what the technical name is for them, but they're carrying females, so probably high-ranking, sort of princesses and things like that, who are, kept shielding. They're sort of in purdah in sort of Islamic culture, so they're transported in these tent-like constructions on top of the camel, and they strike me. They remind me very much of the scene in Kingdom of Heaven when Renaud de Chatillon, what's his name? Forgotten his name. When the villain, the bad Crusader guy, ambushes and captures a pilgrim train down to Mecca, which includes Saladin's sister, I think it is. So they could be used for the Crusades. I could also use them for the Mughal army that I'm slowly putting together. They would do for kind of Islamic Mughal period in India, maybe even the Indian Mutiny. There's certainly a scene in, you've probably never seen it, but the old television TV adaptation of the Far Pavilions, there's an episode in that where the Ash, the central character, is tasked with escorting some princesses down to the south of India to marry the sort of despot in the south of India. And they travel in camels very similar to this, so it could even be used for the Indian Mutiny. But I'm thinking mainly Crusade period. Anyway, enough about that. On to the next item. Okay, and then I got a few more bits painted up from my Panzer Grenadier box. I'm slowly kind of sorting out, that got all jumbled up, and slowly sorting them out and getting them painted. North Africa, Deutsche Afrika Korps Panzer Grenadier Company, from Battlefront. And what you see here are 4 heavy machine gun teams and 2 groups of infantry, and lots more in that box still to paint, but I'm just it's just a sort of a side project really to get it all painted up and completed and ready to play with, and then I'll have to move on to painting some of my British figures from my lead mountain to oppose them. So I've also been working on some more US Marines, all from the Assault Group again. So these are the contents of 2 separate blister packs, US Marines with BAR taking cover, and US Marines with BAR in combat. So just cracking on with that project as well. Not much more to say about it. You'll notice one of these figures has the dreaded captured Japanese flag tucked into his belt, which isn't a kind of style that I particularly like. It's fine just for the occasional figure, but so many of them have it that it just becomes a little bit ridiculous. Yeah, nice figures out. On to the next group, and this is another 2 blister packs here. You've got US Marines with bazooka, so in that you get 4 figures, so there are 2 teams basically, one standing firing and reloading, and one kneeling firing and reloading. And you've also got the group of US Marines 30 cal team advancing, so the machine gun that's been taken off its tripod, and they're carrying the various segments and moving with it. So you've got 2 figures with the gun parts, and you've got 2 just carrying ammunition boxes, and you'll notice the dreaded captured Japanese flag again on one of those. So in a game like Bolt Action, you only need 3 figures for a heavy machine gun team, so he is going to be the one that I won't be using. Okay, and last up in terms of what I've got painted, another group of the Assault Group US Marines. So a bit of a mix here. In the centre, you've got one of the character figures that they do. He's called Big John, so presumably he's meant to represent John Wayne from the film, in the film The Sands of Iwo Jima. He has got a captured Japanese flag in his belt, so one of many that they do, and this is the only one really where I think you can get away with it, because he is meant to be a character, an individual figure. So rather than putting it all in the the run-of-the-mill figures, I'm perfectly happy for him to have one. So he will certainly be appearing in games of Bolt Action when I get round to completing an army. And the other figures, as I say, there's still a bit of a mix. There are 4 figures from the US Marine casualties there, but I've also put on to 2 of the bases 2 medic figures, which are the 2 figures left over. I didn't show you in my last update, where I'd painted the medic pack of 4 figures, but I left 2 of them out because I had in mind to put them on bases with the casualty figures, because they looked like they were tending the wounded. So yeah, they make quite nice casualty markers, I think, and you don't need 4 medics in a game of Bolt Action. So it was a good way of using up the other 2 figures in the blister pack. Okay, right, that's all my painting, so now on to my purchases. Right, first up then, in terms of purchases, I'm slowly kind of preparing this Falklands War game. It's the anniversary this month, 40th anniversary this month, so I'm probably going to miss that, but certainly get it played this year. But the only kind of grass mats I had were just sort of bog standard, sort of green felt kind of mats, and I wanted something a little bit more similar to the terrain in the Falklands. So I thought this was pretty close, and I'm really pleased with it. That's just my hand there to give you an idea of the scale. I'm only showing you a small segment of it. This mat is from Tiny War Games, and it's their Marshlands mat, but I think that's going to be pretty good for the Falklands War. I also got a little bit more scenery. These are some fences and gates, 8 strips from Kitmaster. So these are more these are 800 HO scale, so they'll fit in with my 20mm figures quite nicely. But obviously this is more for model railways. It actually says they're trackside model, but it's going to do fine for a little sheep enclosure or something like that on the Falklands. Not suitable for the Falklands War, but I got these nonetheless because they just caught my eye, and I thought they would do for more jungle terrain. Can't even remember the name of the manufacturer now. The typical sort of Chinese cheap and cheerful vegetation. So I've got ferns there, and can't even remember what these are. Sort of grass-like kind of stuff. It's going to come in handy eventually for games like Congo and so on. What else have I got? For the also mainly for the Falklands War game, I've got from the dice shop more glow-in-the-dark dice. So I've got 10 of each of 10-sided, 12-sided, 8-sided and 6-sided. Why glow-in-the-dark? Well, you may have seen my experimental purchase at DevCon of some glow-in-the-dark dice, and my intention is to, because most of the actions in the Falklands took place at night, I'm going to try and replicate that and keep it sort of fairly dark when I film the bat rep. So I thought the glow-in-the-dark dice might kind of, aid me in that. But yeah, I would have got more, but they were a bit short on one set, so I could only get 10, but probably going to end up getting another, so I've got 20 altogether of each, because I'm going to be playing force on force, and we need lots of different denominations of dice for that. Also related to the Falklands War from Timecast, these are they do a sort of range of Falklands War buildings in 15mm, and this is what these are from. They are basically just rocky outcrops, meant to be 15mm, but obviously rocks are kind of scaleless in a way, so they'll do fine for 20mm. So I've got loads of those. I'll put them all out, and then I'll move the camera around a little bit to show you them, and all assembled. There we go. So once I've got those painted, I'll probably be ready to play a game, so I'll have to crack on with those. But yeah, they're quite, they're quite nice. I mean, you could use stone from your garden if you wanted, but I'm lazy. If you go to Dougie's Wargaming blog show channel, he's done a nice job on a lot of these rocky outcrops, because he's into the Falklands War himself. I suspect he's a Falklands War veteran, but he hasn't he hasn't sort of boasted about that or anything, but yeah, I suspect that's where his interest originally comes from. Anyway, that's everything to do with scenery, but then just one more purchase to show you. Oh no, a couple more purchases to show you, sorry. Right, now I was quite excited about this, although it doesn't look much. Shauno's Wild of Chaos showed some painted 1/300th scale aircraft that he got from the same place as me, the Big Value pack from the Plastic Soldier Company. And yeah, I'd sort of painted those up because I couldn't source any decals. Dom's Decals, who I would have gone to, has ceased trading. He found these from a company called Butler's Printed Models, so I immediately sent off for a whole load. Still not sure though that I've got entirely everything that I need, because I didn't purchase everything. I'll get them out of the pack and show them to you in a little bit more detail. So lots of the German Balkan crosses. There's ones that are just the sort of white outline. There's I don't know how you describe it, but it's got a sort of black edge to the outer part of the cross. Another white outline there, and then you've got this one which doesn't have the black edge, so you can see the difference there hopefully. And then a whole load of RAF roundels as well. Now I haven't got, and I suspect I need some roundels with the yellow outer edge. I think went on the side of planes. Not entirely sure, so I'm probably going to have to supplement with another purchase. But anyway, I can get on now with painting my huge amount of 1/300th aircraft and play a game with those. And that bag didn't have any ME109s in it. So Butler's Printed Models do mainly printed models, so I bought some of their resin ME109s just to see what they were like, and I am pretty happy with them. I don't know whether I'll be able to zoom in a lot. I mean, these are resin, so they're not the plastic ones which would give you lines. But nevertheless, they do still have a kind of rippling, I suppose you'd call it. Oops, sorry, off camera there. Can't really get the lighting to show it up, and as I'm demonstrating, you can barely see it, and with a coat of paint that will be concealed anyway. So I reckon they are pretty decent models. So I'm going to be buying, with my next purchase, some more models from them as well. Right, one more thing to show you in the way of purchases, and that is books. So I bought 3 Osprey books. I placed a pre-order in for Wargames Atlantic's Conquistador and Aztecs, and that has now, I think Wargames Atlantic have a bit of a reputation for tardiness. It was originally due to be released when was it, late February, early March. That kept getting put off, but they have now been dispatched. I've had a email yesterday telling me that they're in the postal system now, so I should get those next week sometime. So I thought in preparation I would get some references, sort of painting guides and so on, and up to the usual Osprey standards. Not that I really needed any more help. Maybe a bit more with the Aztecs. I also got these 2 books, the Conquistador and Aztec Warrior. I have to say though that much as I love Osprey, illustrations. I very rarely read the text, and in which one did I read? This one. In this case, I did, and I wasn't massively impressed. I've got a sort of fairly good knowledge of the period anyway, and it didn't add anything to what I didn't know already, which is not to say it's not a bad book, but it's certainly an introductory text. And the thing that I didn't like about it mainly was that it's written almost in a kind of novel style, so that they introduce this character to you of Miguel de la Cruz, who, as far as I can tell, is a fictitious character, and they run you through his experiences alongside, Cortes' invasion of Mexico, and it didn't really work for me. I would have preferred if they'd stuck to a more kind of historical account of the period rather than introducing this sort of fictional character. Anyway, that's, I get these books for the illustrations, as I say, and not the text, and in that regard I am perfectly happy with them. But I would recommend, if you're interested in getting into the period, I've still got a book that can't get it down from the shelf now. It's a bit of a stretch to get to it, but a book by Hammond Innes called The Conquistador, which I got as a young sort of teenager, and for one Christmas, and for Christmas present, and I've been in love with the book ever since I first read it. It's a very good account by a novelist, interestingly, but no fictional characters in it. It's just written in a really absorbing, immersive style, full of great colour photos and so on, and black and white illustrations as well. Really worth picking up, and that will introduce you to the Spanish conquest of Mexico and Peru, and of course W.H. Prescott, the famous 19th century American historian. His history of the conquest of Mexico is worth the read as well. I could recommend both of those. Anyway, that's the end of my update. It's kind of another long one, so thanks very much if you stuck it out to the end, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.